Hi, Emily. Thank you for being here with me. Um, I wanted to do an interview with you just to talk a little bit about all the advocacy that you've done. Um, you're very well known in the mental health space and in the Asian community, so I wanted to take this opportunity to share a little bit with the community about who you are, your story, and all the wonderful things that you've done. So I know you have like a very long list of things that you've done. You're so amazing. So I'll do another like intro separately to that, but because I just wanted to have us dive into the questions. Um,
Hmm.
so I don't know if you want to talk about how we met or if you want me to share a little bit, because that will kind of dive into our first question.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, it's been quite a number of years since we first met. I remember meeting you after uh, we met online. My friend, our mutual friend Monica Vega introduced us, and then I had a speaking engagement at USC with Dr. Ellen Sachs. Even that speaking engagement was just like I was kind of floored because I'm like, oh my gosh, me of all people, like, um, so it was a seminar where Dr. Ellen Sachs invited both me and Andy Imperato, the
Mhm.
current executive director of Disability Rights California, to speak about our own lived experiences. And funny thing was that during that time, I was a little bit in my own funk at the time. Oh, sorry about that. And but I still, pushed through, and it was really nice to get validation from you when you came up to me afterwards to talk and chat. And um, I think both of us have done our own growth and in mental health advocacy spaces. So yeah, that's my memory. What do you remember?
Um, well, I started with well, I was going to try to record it on here too. But anyway, I started on Access California, and you had been an Access ambassador as well.
Mhm.
And that was kind of my first time that I did advocacy in the mental health space. And I learned a lot from, Cal Voices is now called, but the Access program that was training individuals to learn about the Mental Health Services Act and basically hold the Department of Mental Health accountable to that money that they're receiving from the Mental Health Services Act, which is now going to be changed to the Behavioral Health
Mhm.
um, uh, Community. I don't know what they're calling it, but it's, I guess, kind of the same thing, but just helping more of the people that are houseless. But yeah, I just remember like, oh, Emily used to be with us, and I think you had taken a little break, but I was like, wow, I hear such good things. So that's why I went up to you that time that you did the interview with you did the conversation with Ellen. So yeah, tell us why you became a mental health advocate, why you decided to share about your experience. And before you go into that, I really appreciate how honest you are when you're, having a difficult time, because a lot of times people only want to show when they're doing good, which is not realistic in the mental health world. So go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, uh, well, for me, I felt like growing up, I was a quiet person. I was shy, and a lot of people thought that like I was a cheerful person, but uh, you know, uh, we don't, when we're growing up, we don't have the skills to be able to share how we're feeling from the inside, and not everyone wants to listen. Um, and so it was really hard to find friends that you could trust to share your heart with. Um, and and so I I I I bottled a lot of things up, And for me, I was just over time, I attend specific events. There was actually one event that I attended in 2009, actually. This is called The State of AANHPI, and this booklet was compiled of reports from 2009 to 2012. And um, I was just so excited that to see a space, a public space where different issues with like gambling, just intergenerational trauma, the Khmer Rouge from the Cambodian communities. Like I was that was the first time ever mental health was talked about in any AANHPI, Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander spaces. And so I thought like uh, it inspired me to like how Emma Watson said one time at the UN, if not me, who? If not now, when? And even though I don't have anything past a bachelor's, um, I just feel like a lot of the times, like there's this quote recently that I found. Something it alludes to just because I'm not in operating or functioning in or going into the journey, the path of most other people doesn't mean I'm on the wrong road.
Hmm.
And so in essence, I feel like I've kind of created my own path.
Yeah, definitely.
It feels kind of lonely sometimes.
Mhm.
But I feel like, okay, well, I'm doing it for the right reasons because I don't want people to suffer in silence. I want people to share their stories and feel the when you feel the pain and eventually turn that into your power. I think that's a very transformational thing. And that's why actually like over here, this was supposed to be like a happy birthday or love win sign, but then I rearranged the letters to be like evolve.
I love it. And I think, one of the things you said is like creating your path in a way you're forging the path for others so that when they walk through that same road, it's not as hard because you can, set an example that you've gone through it that people can relate to. So I really love that about how open and vulnerable you are publicly because I think even me, I don't always share when I'm in a down, in a sad space or I think it's just very hard to share that and I really admire you for that.
Thank you.
So I'll go into the second question, which is when did you first find out that you were living with a mental health condition?
Mm, I think in 2013, I was starting to have more meltdowns. And I think in my mind, I was just like, okay, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. Because sometimes in your life, you go through these loops.
Mhm.
And it's like you are faced with similar situations and you end like when you go through these loops and you're just like, okay, I'm frustrated. I don't want to be in this loop anymore. I want out. It's like something has to change. I think, and I was crying a lot more, and um, I didn't know how to respond. I think I do remember making over 60 phone calls in a span of 3 days and, you know, hoping that I would find a resource to help me help myself. Because at that time, I would say, no, I'm not suicidal. then they would say, "Oh, sorry, we can't help you. Here's another number. Here's another number. Here's another number." And I'm just like, "What the heck? When am I going to get the help that I need?" And I shared that story in my Each Mind Matters PSA recovery story video, and I wanted to, because when I wanted to demystify the challenges of and show the journey of what it's like to try to find affordable mental health care services. Like, it's like there's already, the challenge of the stigma, and then there's the challenge of the even accessing it. And but I think that it's so important for people to realize that the healing doesn't always have to be uh, in the traditional sense of a therapist,
Yeah.
and psychiatric medication, which
Mm-hmm.
I found NAMI to be very for, and I was with them for like 9 years, no, over 10 years now, and I've already outgrown them.
Mm-hmm.
So but I think what's most important is that we learn to find ourselves, while navigating all the challenges of life. And I really like this postcard, and it says, "When I dare to be powerful, to use my strength in the service of my vision, then it becomes less and less important whether I am afraid." Audre Lorde.
Right.
So I just like try to surround myself with like very empowering quotes,
Mm-hmm.
and continue doing my art, um, just to feel good about myself.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And
Mhm.
I really love, what you shared about how much, like when you said you made 60 calls, it's a lot of people, they are not even capable of doing that because they're so struggling. And on top of that, for the access to mental health to be so, inaccessible, then, it almost really becomes like this huge barrier that maybe people are falling through the cracks, and really they are ending their lives or they are hurting themselves. Um, and I had a time where I was really sick and I really needed a referral to a therapist. And then they gave me an appointment a month away, and then they canceled that appointment like the day of. And basically, by the time I got referred, it was like 3 months later. And I put a grievance because, I didn't have to struggle for that long. Like it seems like 3 months is not very long, but all they had to do was pretty much give me a referral, and it was. But anyway, that's just another example on my end. But
Mhm.
I appreciate how resourceful you are and how, like it takes perseverance. And again, not everybody is in the space to have that ability to do that. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. You have to be relentless. If there's
Mhm.
something that you really want, then you have to keep on like fighting for it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. Um,
Mhm.
we'll jump into the next question. So question number three was, do you have a support system? If so, for those who don't have support in their lives, what do you suggest?
So what I usually suggest is mutual aid. I feel
Mm,
like mutual aid is another word, phrase for peer support.
mm,
Because in mutual aid, the facilitators allow for um, the facilitators and others to share their own lived experiences or similar situations when people bring up their own stories and share their own experiences, it helps with um, others hearing other stories to help them not feel so alone in their own circumstances. And because, even recently, I've been joining ever since my father passed away just over 2 years ago. I joined a support group through SIPA Cares, and it's virtual. Like even the last session, like they talked about estrangement, they talked about grief, um, they talked about like coming out, not coming out to their family. And most of us are all Asians in this group. And so, um, immigrants have this challenge of the intergenerational traumas, and so I think that it's really important to try to find those spaces to find the support, to find other people who have similar values as you, and when you find that connection, then they kind of over time become your family outside your family.
Yeah.
Uh, mhm.
And I love that you mentioned sometimes the support from whether peer support or mutual aid is helpful when they're within your culture because they're like, for example, I know in the Latino community, there's an additional stigma compared to like, the general American culture. With the help of some people, started a peer support in Spanish. And it was because I was in a English speaking peer support group. And I was like, oh, they don't have this in Spanish. Let's do it. And it was a huge difference. It was like night and day. Like none of the people that came had an official diagnosis. They weren't taking any medications. They weren't aware of a lot of resources. And they came to us and they're like, what do you think I have? And we're like, well, we're not medical professionals. We're just pure facilitators. And but me openly talking about my diagnosis and saying I have bipolar disorder, I take these medications, I have a psychiatrist. And for them, that was like, oh wow, and you're just talking about it like openly, that's a big deal. So that kind of opened the door for them to seek services, which, like you said, sometimes they're just suffering in silence because of shame, stigma. And I think that's very big in our communities. Um, and going to that, like that's a little towards my next question, which is what motivates to speak for you to speak openly about your mental health. And I don't know if I'm assuming correctly, but I think part of it is because of your own culture, right? Like um, sometimes it's not spoken about in our cultures.
Mm-hmm. Um, yeah, because when I was growing up with my conservative Taiwanese family,
Mhm.
um, you're just not supposed to share your heavy emotions with other people, or else you'll bring shame to yourself and the family. And uh, in the beginning years of my advocacy, I didn't have any mentors. I just went into it and did the best I could. And so was even interviewed by the World Journal, Chinese Daily News, and the article was eventually translated into English. They didn't tell me what they were gonna call the article, so my parents were not happy when it was published. It was called "Victim of Perfectionist Parents Speaks Out." And yeah, that was the first time my mom had threatened to disown me.
Oh,
And I was like, back then I was crying, and but you know, um, it's very challenging to navigate those conversations because they sometimes you feel like, okay, is this conditional love or is this unconditional? Like I'm, just navigating like the dynamics, power dynamics, even within the family is just very frustrating. And I felt like, but even though that article, went out to the world for the world to see, and my dad would even said, like, look at these comments at the end of this article. Like there's, you know, I'm like, Dad, like, why do you need to care what these strangers are saying? And he's like, I care. I'm like, oh, they're strangers. Like, and but that's, saving face, right? Like, and I wasn't invited to that Thanksgiving dinner because of what happened.
Oh, wow.
And then my husband had to intervene because he spoke for me while I was crying my eyes out, and he said to my parents, "Emily's not trying to publicly blast you. She's
Mhm.
trying to say that she's one of many children of immigrant parents that just didn't feel like she had a voice growing up, and so." By me sharing my story probably over 180 times now since 2010. I've pretty much I enjoy being invited to go and share my story because it it it's like a release. It's like and it's also a validation. Like my story matters, and that everyone has to take ownership over their own stories and find, like, take the good with the bad, and learn to be grateful for the good, the highs, because you wouldn't appreciate the highs without the lows.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one of the things that I related to when you mentioned it is when I got sick for the first time where I was studying abroad and I had to come back. I was supposed to be in Spain for a year. And then halfway around Christmas, I got really sick and I had a manic episode. And my mom was there, thank God. And she brought me back and I couldn't finish. And she told me to tell everyone that I had pneumonia or something, that's why I came back, which at that time was the best thing for me too, because I wasn't ready to talk about it or um to kind of face the situation. So that's fine, but I also still thought like, oh, like I felt like I couldn't even tell my best friend, and it wasn't her intention to tell me that it's a subject not to talk about, but it was more like, in her mind, this is protecting me, which I think at the time I needed. I wasn't ready to talk about it openly. Um, yeah, so but I mean, yeah, that's hard when family is taking your actions or your need to speak out about it, like you're saying it was their fault, where it's probably part of their trauma immigrating to the United States, living you know in a survival mode for a long time, which is, I feel like my mom went through, being a single mother coming here.
Mm.
So, so yeah, I feel like, sometimes they think that um us having a mental health issue, I think sometimes they think it's partly their fault, but I think it's like it was part of their journey as well to live through all this trauma. And I
Mhm.
think it would have been almost impossible for some of that trauma to not affect us. Um,
Mhm.
so, and I think that's part of the healing that you're doing. You're preventing other people from going through that and openly talking about it. And now that I'm a mother, I think, um, I hope that he doesn't see any shame in, his mom having bipolar disorder, or there's a big chance that he might have it when he grows up. But I have the tools and I have the ways to support him if that were to ever happen. So anyway, um,
Well, I give you props for being a mom, though. Yeah, a human mom. I have five girl cats, so I'm a cat mom. And yeah, because I bet being a human parent is not easy. Doesn't co life doesn't always come with a handbook, and
yeah.
you can read all the parenting books that you want to try to be prepared, but there's a difference between reading it and reading about it and actually doing it. So,
Yeah, and I remember an interview with Andy Parado who has bipolar disorder, and he mentioned that his three boys, oh, I mean, I think they're adults or teenagers, but they all have it as well. So it is likely, more likely to have someone, your children to have that condition. And I remember when I was a peer specialist, one of my clients had bipolar disorder and she was worried about her son. And I was like, but you're here. You're taking the steps to help yourself, to give yourself the tools to, to be a parent that can support their child if they have this condition. And like I mentioned, Andy Parada had mentioned, that was a very, um, not that it held him back from having kids, but it's something that he really thought of. Like, do I want to bring a child into this world that might have a mental health condition? And that's something that's gone through my mind as well. But,
mhm.
with a 3-month-old.
Hmm.
Um,
Awesome.
so I'll go into the next question, which is, what do you consider your biggest accomplishment?
Biggest accomplishment. I'm not sure. I mean, I think being able to find my art again is probably one of my biggest achievements. This is a piece that
Love
I
it.
did. If
Yeah,
I was to be a cartoon, this is what I would look like.
I love it, all the colors. I love it.
Yeah, this is my original. It's probably gonna go into my art show. I'm actually working on trying to transform my living room right here into my art show space, art activity space. So, like, there'll be like plenty of things to play with if I have invite friends to come over and yeah, because like over a year ago, I had the opportunity to do an art show with Painted Brain.
Mm.
Um, it was kind of interesting because it was called like Reentry Arts Program or something, and but I didn't look at the reentry part of the program name. And but overall it was like really a nice it was a success, and I got to share the art space with two of the ladies. One was African American and the other was Hispanic, and so they got all BIPOC, people of color to be showcased, and it was really nice because it was the first art show that I had done since I was in high school or late junior high, where my Taiwanese artist teacher had showcased all his students' artwork, and so it I just yeah, finding my artist vibe has like really helped me to just have fun with
Mm.
colors and, you know, like,
I love
and
it.
I still represent the green ribbon because it's something that just stuck with me since the beginning of my advocacy. Everyone knows that pink is the color for breast cancer, but no one knows that, the green is for mental health. And I used to call myself hashtag Lady in Green when
I
I would
remember that.
write. Yeah, the lime green wigs. And then, like, ever since my dad passed away, I'm like, let's just celebrate life in rainbow,
Yeah, and I mean I really love that like healing therapy, art therapy. And I actually do art as well. Like I kind of have let that not I have left that alone for a little bit, but I remember one time being in the hospital and for mental health and doing a bunch of art. And there I remember we were supposed to do a group and I just sat and I was doing my art and the psychiatrist came to see that I was doing art and he just left me alone because I for some reason the group was a little like, oh my God, everybody's like really struggling and I didn't want to hear it. I was like wanting to heal myself through my art and I think he caught that. So he left me doing my art and yeah, I actually have like some pieces that I'm like, oh, this is, they're in the back of a menu, like, the hospital menus that you get, not menus, but the little strips that they give you telling you what meal you're gonna have.
Mm.
Um, so anyway, but yeah, so we only have like 5 minutes left. So I wanted to give you the space to share anything that you'd like, or anyone that is living with a mental health condition. Um, is your I'm not sure if I'm assuming incorrectly, but is it depression the condition that you usually face with or
Yeah, so I think I've been diagnosed with depression and anxiety, and then, like, but um I don't know if therapists can actually diagnose you with CPTSD, or yeah, complex PTSD.
Mhm.
But I mean, when I meet with my therapist, we don't really talk about diagnoses. He
Mhm.
just he
It
just does
doesn't
a
matter.
check-in.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, um, and but one thing that I have been advocating for over the last couple of years, is the problems of 988.
The problems
Because
of what? I'm sorry.
988, the National Suicide
Oh,
Hotline.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Uh-huh. Yes.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And every mental health or every mental health organization is promoting 988 without, I feel like it was like a pilot that went out and didn't consider all the details, because I've called it for others and I've called it for me. I even tried calling 988 for, like, a girl in Taiwan who was suicidal, and but they were like, no, we don't have international resources. But yeah, the last time I ever called 988 was right after I did the art show and the like a even a piano performance, and finished taking another peer support training through Painted Brain, um, to be certified. After all that, like, I got 5150, psychiatric imprisonment. They call it psychiatric incarceration, forced treatment, and it's you. I had heard of this before, because of Ellen Sachs and other psychiatric survivors who, uh, we could talk about this, even more in another segment, because psychiatric survivors, I feel like they're unprotected, by the
Mhm.
ADA, and when police respond to mental health crises, they're not the right people to be addressing those situations because that's not their background.
Yeah.
And so, like, to know that 5150s, like, I've known that 5150s can lead to death.
Mm,
Even one of my distant relatives, like a couple years ago, was 5150 by a social worker in an ER, and and then he was transferred over to a psychiatric hospital without informing the family, and then he died the next day, and it's just like, oh,
oh my
what?
God.
So, my relatives won't update me, but there is a lawsuit, and it's just scary when
Yeah,
when people fall through that crack,
yeah.
and then you're just like, what the hell is going on here? I was yeah,
And I know when I worked at a mental health clinic, they literally called it like, oh, we're taking away their rights because
yeah,
they're saying that at this moment, you're possibly a harm to yourself or others or gravely disabled, then they need to take over because you're not equipped to take care of yourself. And um, yeah, like you said, we only have like less than a minute, so
yeah.
we can talk
We
about
can
that a
do
lot more.
another
Yeah,
segment.
definitely. But I'll wrap up before we get cut off and just thank you so much for giving me the time to talk to you,
Of course.
to learn a little bit more about you and um I'll be keeping in touch and like I said, we can hopefully do another segment soon.
Yes.
Okay, thank you
Always.
so much. Yay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Hi, Amparo.
Good seeing you.
Of course.
Bye-bye. Uh,
Let's.
okay, I don't know how to stop recording. But it
Uh,
says it's gonna end in a second.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Do you do video chat, by the way?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, I might try to Facebook Messenger video